391 BC, 3504 AM. According to Livy, an evil star appeared over Rome, and reports filtered into the area of a mighty people from the north, who were invading northern Italy, besieging the Etruscan city of Clusium. The Romans sent ambassadors to make peace with the strangers, called Gauls, Celts, and Senones, all three names referring to the same people. But the Romans played the Celts falsely after making peace, being seen by Celts in acts of violence against their kinsmen. When news reached the rest of the Gauls that the Romans spoke peace but spilled blood, the Celts prepared for invasion of Rome. Adding insult to injury, the Celts then learned that the men who played them false were elevated in social status in Rome for their role of treachery. Priorly having no intention of entering Roman territory, this episode resulted in the Gallic invasion of Rome. In wrath, the horde of Gauls marched deeper into Italy, overrunning every settlement and town on their way. The stealth of the invasion caught the Romans by surprise, and the Gauls were 11 miles away from Rome before Rome was able to send out an army in their defence. The Romans were terrified at the sight of mighty tall warriors with long beards, strange heavy weapons, war hammers and battle axes, speaking and chanting an alien tongue, of ferocious appearance and demeanour, and seemingly undisciplined. The savage military tactics were too much for the Romans, who instantly fled. Almost half of the Roman army slaughtered in their retreat, just north of the city along the Allia River. The Gauls entered a deserted and silent city of magnificent Roman architecture, streets paved with stones. With gates wide open, they at first thought it was a trap. Most of the Roman population, women and children, with many younger men, were holed up in the citadel or the capital. The warlike Gauls stumbled in masses down the streets, bewildered at the sight of many old men who just stared at them from windows and balconies in the streets and courts. These were those who were not permitted to enter the citadel for their age and lack of room. The Gauls let them be as they sacked the entire city until an old man attacked a Celt, which resulted in the death of all Romans in the city outside the citadel, which the Celts tried but could not breach. The Gauls departed the city after 4 days with their treasures and fought a series of battles with local peoples, even returning to Rome and occupying parts of it. This was a dark stain on the Republic, and false traditions were invoked, claiming that Romans amassed another army and drove away the Gauls, but this was untrue. The Celts would occupy the region and city for over 3 years before finally departing. However, they remained in Italy for a long time. In Calendrix, this year is one specifically related and connected to ancient Israel in several ways. This is because the origin of the Celts and Gauls were a people descended directly from Israel. The greatest number in Calendrix associated with Israel is 2448, the Hebrew or Annus Mundi years of 1447 BC, the exodus of Israel from Egypt. In the year 1056 AM, 2839 BC, the patriarch Noah was born in the first year of the oppression of the Nephilim before the flood. This year of the Gallic invasion of Rome was 2448 years since Noah's birth in 2839 BC in the oppression, and 1056 years after the Exodus in 1447 BC. This year was the 864th year from the founding of the Danaan Israelite dynasty of Mycenae in 1255 BC, a different branch of ancient Israelites known as the Ionians. This was the 612th year. 7344 months is 2448 times 3, after the throne of David established in 1003 BC, and 540 years, half of 1080, since Israel became a nation in 1407 BC, with the conquest of Canaan, and 490 years, 70 times 7, after the capital city of Israel, Samaria, was built in 881 BC. This is also the 330th year. 3960 months is 795 times 5, after the last of the 10 tribes of Israel were deported into Assyria. The first mention of the Celts in the ancient world was circa 500 BC by the Greek geographer Hecataeus. Later, Ephorus in about 350 BC wrote that the Celts and the Greeks had many of the same customs. The Gauls were interchangeably called Celts, and it was universally recognised in antiquity that they were one and the same people. The ancient Celtic calendar was a relic from Hebrew antiquity, dividing the year into lunar months and counting time by the reckoning of nights instead of days. This was a Mosaic institution borrowed from the older Babylonian, Sumerian, and antediluvian civilization. In Genesis we read that, quote, "The evening and the morning were the first day," unquote. Time reckoned by a preceding darkness that begins the day. The Celts of old claimed to have been descended from a race divided into 12 tribes. One of their chief patriarchs was Manaz. Manaz is none other than the ancient Hebrew patriarch Manasseh of the tribe of Joseph, who were destined to migrate ever westward, a people who would move on to the furthest west part of continental Europe, Gaul, ancient France and Spain, and then many centuries later they would sail over the Atlantic and found the United States of America. The Celtic Gauls occupied northern Italy for a time before branching out, many settling Asia Minor and founding Galatia. Asia Minor exported Ionian and Danaan Israelite fleets for centuries, and in late history it would export Celtic people, also descended from Israel. Galatia lay at the heart of Asia Minor, and during the Assyrian and Persian empires, this region was occupied by the populous Scythians or Cimmerians of Samaria. From Galatia they would move in waves of settlers that would found Galilee, Gilead, and Golanitus. The term Galatian derives from the Babylonian word for prisoners, Galutha. Scholars assert that the mass of Judah and Benjamin remained in Media after the Babylonian captivity, returning to the region of Galilee. Remember, Jesus of Galilee was of the royal house of Judah. The message of Christianity was to be taken to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and one of the principal books that contained this message to these people was the book of Galatians. The 7 Christian churches were in Asia Minor in Greece, this being because the elements of the Christian faith are actually a revival of ancient Israelite faith. The Sinoan Celts that invaded Rome were direct descendants of Israelites, for the Sinoan term is the Latin for the Hebrew tribe of Simeon. The Celts strongly believed in the immortality of the soul, and it was definitely a parallel to the early Israelite habit that the Celts took great care in their art to avoid any representation of the natural forms in the plant and animal world. The injunction against image making was strict in the Old Testament, akin to idolatry, and this adherence to this law is characteristic of Celtic art. 1. Livy. 2. Celtic myths and legends. 3. Tacitus, Annals of Imperial Rome. 6. The Philosopher and the Druid. 7. Caesar against the Celts. 8. Sacred Number. 9. Northern Mysteries and Magic. 10. A Short History of the World. 11. The Dragon Legacy. 12. Tracing Our Ancestors.